Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. And this is Valentine's Day, February 14th, Wednesday. Hope you guys have had a lovely Valentine's Day. And I hope you guys are out spending time with your loved one and or have spent some time with your loved ones today and enjoy this day. And if you haven't, and you just happen to be watching or listening to the radio, then I've got a show for you. So we got something for you tonight, and we've had a good week so far. The first two shows of the week were really fantastic, and we've got some good feedback from people. I really appreciate the feedback that people have been giving us, and so that we can try to make this show better every night. But the first, we took health to church on Monday night and got some revelation about greener pastures and why what we do, what we sometimes that we think that the next place is the best place, and we know that if we'll just define our why, then wherever we go is no problem, right? And it's a big deal. Like today is Valentine's Day, right? And when I was in chiropractic school, I actually had a classmate, cool dude, that is from New Jersey, and this is the only day of the year that he would eat a candy bar, was on Valentine's Day. And I thought that was crazy. Like, I was like, man, I wonder if I could ever do that. I wonder if I could ever get myself to the point where I could, like, just one day a year just have a candy bar. I thought that was crazy. And I don't remember what it was. A Baby Ruth, I think, was his thing. I can't remember what his favorite candy bar was, but yeah, well, I've made it past another Valentine's Day, and there's no problem. So this is the second one that we've made it past, and we won't be having any candy bars today. We won't be having any sweets. As a matter of fact, we had a conversation this morning, and one of my guys said to me, he actually said to me, he said, he gave up dark chocolate for Lent. And I was like, well, I thought you were supposed to give up bad things, right? And he was like, well, it leads to me eating too much of it. And so I got to thinking about that. I was like, and he said, it helps me with my sweet tooth. And I was like, what does that mean? Because I just thought to myself, wow, like, it helps me with my sweet tooth. Like that's an interesting way of saying that. Like, where did that come from? Where do we get the saying, I got a sweet tooth? Because I've had one my whole entire life. There's no way I'd get past a Valentine's Day without having some sort of chocolate or something sweet, right? I mean, that's part of the deal, is to do that on Valentine's Day. Well, I looked it up earlier, and so I just thought, hey, it's fun. It's Valentine's Day. We should talk about it, right? So sweet as an adjective, and this is coming from online etymology dictionary. So take it for what it's worth. But fondness, the sweet tooth, is fondness for sugary stuff. This is late in the 14th century, and SWEETETOTH, sweet tooth, from sweet plus tooth in the sense of taste liking. Toothsome, it says see toothsome. So, and it gets into the adjective, and it talks about Old English and pleasing to the senses, mind, or feeling, having a pleasant disposition. And then it gets into some German, Saxon type stuff way back in the day, 14th century. This is reconstructed to be from the PIE root, and sweet and pleasant. So thought that was interesting, right? We've said that because that's kind of where we get the idea, kind of like as pleasing to the ear in the Old English, in reference to jazz played at a steady tempo and without improvisation. By 1924, as pleasing to the eye, beautiful, desirable, that's mid-14th century, of persons, gracious, kind, having pleasant manners, that's Old English. Words for sweet in the Indo-European languages typically are used in reference to other senses as well, and in general for pleasing. So, interesting. Like, I was like, all right, well, it's been around for a while. So to be sweet on someone is infatuated with them, right? So I just thought it was. I thought that was it caught me because we've been talking so much about sugar and we've been talking so much about dopamine that it just kind of caught me, and I thought, man, that's an interesting statement. I should listen or look that up and see where it came from. I got a sweet tooth. You know that's not true, right? You do not have a sweet tooth. You do not have a craving for sweets. You do not have a tongue that wants sweet things. All those, your tongue is a tool that your brain uses to get what it wants. That's what your tongue is. It's a tool. You're going to use it to speak. You're going to use it to hold your mouth together. You're going to use it for to taste your food, and the taste is what your brain wants. So when you think to yourself, man, I really want that sugar tonight. I think I'm going to have that cookie. I really do think that it's Valentine's Day. We should have us a cookie or something, right? Well, just know that what you're doing is you're working on that nucleus accumbens in your brain, and you're changing the way that your dopamine level is presented to you. And that changes your motivation in life. I know. I know. I'm sitting here by myself in my office live at 6:10 on Valentine's Day. And don't worry, I cleared my schedule between. We started at 7:30 this morning. We've been adjusting we adjust from 7:30 to 9:30, and then I cleared my schedule from 9:30 until 3 o'clock this afternoon. And I spent the entire day with my wife, and we went and ran some errands that we needed to do. We went and got us we sat at Starbucks, and I got me a glass of tea, and we just visited for a little while. And then I took her shopping at one of her favorite little boutiques here in town, and we did good. We were successful, and then we went and had lunch with our daughter, and then we took care of a couple other things that we had to take care of this afternoon. So we had a great day together, and today is our 39th Valentine's Day. And I thought I'd just share. If I haven't shared that story with you, I thought I'd just share that story with you because, you know, we don't have to talk about mitochondria, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. We don't have to talk about mitochondria every single night, or fish oil or nervous system or whatever. Which we'll get to that in a minute. But this is life, and I try to share some of this with you. But I don't know. When I was a freshman in high school, Leslie and I had already met. We met when we were in 7th grade, and so we went through 7th and 8th grade together, and we became pretty good friends. And we were going through the first half of 9th grade together. And I don't have any idea why, but for some reason, I just decided that a couple days or the night before, probably, I just told my mom, but it might have been a couple days because we ended up getting it done. I told my mom, I said, hey, Mom, I want to get Leslie some chocolates for Valentine's Day. And she was like, okay. And we were not romantic. She had her other boyfriends. I was just a kind of a nerd kid. And it's kind of that awkward freshman stage, and so I got her some chocolates, and so I just walked up to her just right there and walked right up to her and gave her a box of chocolates and said Happy Valentine's Day, and then just turned around and walked away. And that was it right there. She didn't know what to do with that. She said she went into her English class right after that, and she was just like stunned. She's like, I don't know what to say. Jason just gave me some chocolates. I don't know what to do with that. And we didn't even go out on a date until the spring of our sophomore year. And so we shared I gave her those chocolates on that day. And then the next year, our sophomore year, when Valentine's Day came on, the student council was selling some carnations. And so I actually got a couple of those carnations and sent them out. But I sent Leslie a carnation, and then later on that spring, we went out on our first date. So we count those first 2 Valentines because she didn't have another Valentine's apparently. If she did, she won't tell me about it. So I can't figure out this point if she did have one in those 2 days. But this would make, if you count those 2, we've had 37 consecutive ones. And so I count the first 2 myself. So 39 years in a row now that that we've had a Valentine. So we are extremely blessed. So anytime you hear me talking about us or fussing or whatever that sort of thing is, or any of the things that we've been through in our lifetime, she's been the love of my life since I was, I mean, it started when we were 16, but I was really 15 um, when when I just knew for some reason. It's one of those things that maybe there might have been one of those moments where the Spirit led me to do that. I don't know why I came up with it. No, I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't tell anybody I was going to do it. It wasn't like there was some sort of conversation. It was just a knowing. It was just a knowing of knowing where you're supposed to be. And on that day, I just knew where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do. And I'm so thankful that because she's been my best friend and the love of my life, and a fantastic mother to our children and a fantastic wife to me. And I couldn't be more happily married right now at 53 years old. And I'm so glad that she's my partner in life. So I love Valentine's Day. I love people. I love my family. I love kids. I love my kids. I love taking care of people. I love chiropractic. I love the things that happen in our office on a daily basis. I love living in West Texas. I love the fact that I was raised in eastern New Mexico and Oklahoma and East Texas. I love the fact that I've gotten to spend my life with different kind of people, from athletics to colleges to growing up on a horse ranch and being at a racetrack and having all the experiences that I have. I just feel extremely blessed every single day. And I know how lucky I am. I tell people all the time, someone's got to be the luckiest guy in town. And it's not my fault that it's me. And that's the way I feel. I feel extremely lucky every single day. I feel lucky to get to come to work. I feel lucky to live in Lubbock and around the people that are here. I'm so blessed that I got to be a Red Raider. All those things. Like I on a day like today, when everybody is drawing hearts and wearing heart shirts and talking about love, it's a day that that I just really enjoy, because it just whatever. It's a pagan holiday, like we all know that, but whatever. It's a day of just saying, hey, like it's just things that I love, and I really do appreciate them, and I feel very blessed every single day to get to do this. And then somehow I ended up getting to be a chiropractor. Like I get to work on the most amazing system in the universe every single day. Like there's nothing more amazing than the human nervous system. Like your brain and spinal cord, your peripheral nervous system, the physiology of your body is wonderfully made. I think I read somewhere, right? It's just amazing what we are. And then I get to come to work and I get to work on that. And then lucky me, I get to sit here between 6 and 7, 5 nights a week and talk about health. Like, dang, it's just like more icing on the cake. So couldn't be any better if you're into icing and stuff, which, we're not anymore. Like that stuff is old hat, right? And so anyway, I love Valentine's Day. I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my family. I appreciate my parents. I appreciate my brother and sister. This is a good day for a guy like myself. And I also know that there's some of you out there who are watching this show who don't have a Valentine today. So I hope you love this show. I hope that you can listen to this show and say, hey, I love listening to Dr. Clemmons. He's crazy, and sometimes he messes it all up. But I like the show, and I love what he's sharing with me. We got one of those messages last night that they love watching the show pretty much on a daily basis. And I know it's a lot of content. I know these shows are long and sometimes they're boring, and we try to get them right. But if you're out there and you don't have a Valentine, then I hope you know that part of me sharing this is saying that I love you too. I want you to know that somebody does. And if you got a question and I can answer it for you, this is going to be, it's not like there's going to be a ton of people watching this show tonight because everybody's out on a date, hopefully, right? So, but if you got something you want to share, send it to me. If you've got a question or something about your health, send it to me. If you've got a text and you're on the radio and you want to send us a text, 806-794-0400 is our text line. You can get into that with us. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have if you send me a text. And so we'll just get after it. So tonight is our book review night. And this book is really awesome. I got this book a couple of weeks ago. It's by Lee Know, Lee Lee No Know. He's a ND, doctor of and naturopath. See what about doesn't really get too much. Let me see if I can find something about him in this book. There we go. Lee No, India is a licensed naturopathic doctor based in Canada and the recipient of several awards. Known by his peers to be a strategic and forward-thinking entrepreneur and physician, he has held positions as medical advisor, scientific evaluator, and director of research and development for major organizations. Besides managing scientific affairs for his own company, he also currently serves as a consultant to the natural health products and dietary supplements industry. He serves on the editorial advisor board for Alive magazine, Canada's most read natural health magazine. He calls the Greater Toronto area home, where he lives with his partner and two sons, and has a particular interest in promoting natural health and environmental stewardship. So it's a good book. And in the first half of the book gets into, it's called Mitochondria, the Future of Medicine. Mitochondria, the Future of Medicine. And the keys to understanding disease, chronic illness, aging, and life itself. And he does an awesome job of really breaking down the biochemistry of what happens with glucose and how you get glucose into the cell and how you take it through the whole process of creating energy from it and ATP and how that goes, how it happens, and then what happens when it goes wrong. And when it goes wrong, then it causes a free radical buildup or some other things. And I don't want to get into too deep into the biochemistry, because I know the biochemistry is hard. It's hard to explain on a radio show or on a Facebook show. But basically, to be really just broad in general, what happens, and you guys that are, you doctors out there or whatever, you chiropractic students or all you smart people, you already know all this stuff. But so you have a cell, and you kind of have a glucose gate that allows glucose to get into the cell. And in a lot of cells, you need insulin. So you got to have an insulin receptor that allows you for insulin to dock with that receptor, open up that glucose gate, allow glucose to get into the system and get into the cell. And then inside the cell, we've got these mitochondria. And I'm just going to be very generic with it right there. But your body, your cell is going to take that glucose. It's going to break it down through a couple of different processes. And then it's going to take that glucose through the process right here. And it's going to run it through some things inside the mitochondria. And then basically on the other side of it, you're going to get ATP. And ATP is what runs the cell. Right? And we've talked about that a lot, because we've talked about on the show, we've talked about why it's so important to be able to get this to work right. One of the bad things that happens is at the same time we make an ATP, we also make a little thing called a free radical. And the free radical can be dangerous to the cell, and it can be dangerous to the mitochondria. And we've talked about this multiple times, where we have glutathione. And glutathione is the protector of it. It balances this free radical. it kind of neutralizes the free radical so that the free radical doesn't damage the mitochondria and we can keep the power on to the cell. And I know you guys, we've gone over that lots of times on the show. That's not anything that's new, but that right there is really very important. That's why I am such a big fan of the whole 6-3 ratio, the omega 6s and the omega 3s. Remember, because the 6s make the cell wall rigid and the 3s make the cell wall fluid. And we gotta have a good cell wall so that we can make glutathione, so that we can protect it from free radicals, so that we can keep the mitochondria healthy. I've said that a lot on the show. That's not new to you. You guys have heard that multiple times. And that's why I'm the world's biggest fan, or equal to the world's biggest fan, of omega-3s or fish oil, right? And what is fish oil? It's EPA as far as we're concerned, and it's DHA. And the DHA we want to be, our baseline is 1,000 milligrams. That's what we're looking for, is 1,000 milligrams. And that would put EPA, because this is going to be a 2-to-1 ratio, that's going to put EPA at 2,000 milligrams. So the total fish oil is 3,000 milligrams is the baseline. Can't write that right there. 3,000 milligrams is the baseline of fish oil, and that's what we're looking for. So you guys, it's like we have these conversations over and over again. Maybe I just have them with myself. I don't know, but when we talk about it, I will get people talking to me. They don't want the fish oil that we have in the office. They want to go buy their own fish oil, which is fine with me. I don't care where you get your fish oil from. I mean, it'd be better if you just got it from wild caught fish, and then you wouldn't have to have any fish oil at all. But that we don't do that. So, but I'll get pictures of people that send me their fish oil, and based on what I know, I start off with DHA at 1,000. So figure out how many pills you got to take. So one of them got sent to me today, and one of the pictures of fish oil that I got sent to me was 1,400 milligrams of EPA and 480 milligrams of DHA, and that was for 2 pills. Okay, so how am I going to dose that thing? What am I going to say to that patient? That I said, look, we got to get DHA to 1,000, so that's pretty dang close to 500. So you need to dose that at 4 pills. Now, when you do that, you'll be at 2,800 of EPA, but I don't care. Like, that's just, the EPA is just going to balance your arachidonic acid anyway, and that's going to keep your inflammation down. So that whole component right there is for inflammation, but the DHA part is getting to 1,000 is for your brain. And this gal just happened to be pregnant. So now she's going to be donating her DHA to the baby in order for the baby to start to build brain synapses and nerves and all that sort of thing as the baby's going. There's where your postpartum depression comes in. A lot of that time is because we're losing that DHA and we're losing that brain. The mama is losing that brain function because she's losing that DHA right there. So that's stuff that we talk about lots of times, right? And we've talked about it lots of times in the past. And so now what we have a chance to do tonight is to read some things, and I'm just going to get to the end of the book. I want to get to the part of the book that talks about I want to let someone else's words. I want to share someone else's words with you so that you can hear someone else talk about how important it is to keep your mitochondria healthy, and what difference it makes. Because I think it might help a little bit if you did have a little bit better understanding. Because you're like, what different? Like, why does it matter? Like, why do you talk about fish oil all the time? Why do you care so much about our 6-3 ratio? None of my other doctors ever talk about that. I mean, honestly, right? How many times have you been to the doctor in your lifetime, in your entire lifetime? How many times have you been to the doctor and your doctor checked your omega-6-3 ratio? I'll let you think about that for just a second, right? Like almost never, right? Almost never have you ever been to the doctor and they checked your 6-3 ratio. Almost never did your doctor have a conversation with you about the importance of your mitochondria. Nowadays, maybe some of the medical doctors are coming over to the wellness side. We've got this new wellness hospital in Lubbock, right? We're kind of getting some medical doctors talking about it. But what difference does it make, right? Why? What? Because that's where it comes down to where it matters. And that's where I just want to read some of this to you. I just want you to hear it so that you can kind of understand it just a little bit. And I'm just taking this straight from Lee No, ND, Mitochondria and the Future of Medicine. So these are not my words. These are his words. And I just want you to hear it, right? So let's just talk about mitochondria and cardiovascular disease, heart disease. What's the number one killer in America? Heart disease. What's the number two killer in America? Cancer, right? Those two things. Well, guess we're right up against a break. So what we're going to do is we're going to hang on for a second. We're going to take this break, and then we're going to come back right after the break, and then we're going to talk about why it matters. So I hope you guys will stick with us, and we'll be right back with Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, right after these messages. Okay. Yeah, so I want to hold up just a second because I want the listeners on the radio to hear this part as well. That I promise you what happens. At least it happens almost every single day in my world. What happens is it doesn't matter what we eat, whether we exercise, how much sleep we get, how much stress we're under, how we handle our stress. It doesn't matter until we're sick. And then, as soon as we're sick, it matters a lot, right? As soon as you get diagnosed with a brain tumor, all of a sudden you will search every square inch of the planet to try to figure out how to fix this problem. I've got that going on in my family right now, right? We didn't care before that. We didn't care about anything. We didn't care about exercise. We didn't care about nutrition. We didn't care about stress. We didn't care about those things until we got a brain tumor. Then all of a sudden it becomes the most important thing in our life. We don't care about exercise and sugar and all that stuff. We don't care about eating those cookies tonight until we get cancer. And then we all of a sudden care, right? Like all of a sudden when we get dementia, we can't remember things. Then it starts to set in on us that, man, like it starts to worry. So when you have a wellness mentality gives you this idea and says, hey, look, maybe I should know that some of these things lead to some of these things, and maybe I might want to try to do some of the things now instead of waiting until it's too late, right? That's what we're talking about. Let me get back on the show here. All right, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. Thanks for tuning in on this Valentine's Day and listening to us. Appreciate that. We're talking about a book called Mitochondria and the Future of Medicine. So let's talk about the role of mitochondria in cardiovascular disease. So cardiovascular disease is a broad category of health conditions and is likely of great interest to the majority of reading in this book because it is the leading cause of death globally. Conditions such as angina, hypertension, congestive heart failure, ischemia, and diastolic dysfunction all have their roots in mitochondrial energy. Not only can these conditions arise from a cellular energy deficiency, but they can also leak the purine building blocks of ATP out of the cell. Interestingly, when purine building blocks leak from the cell, they are metabolized to uric acid, and high uric acid in patients is often reflected of dysfunctional ATP metabolism. An important point to understand for clinicians treating gout, for example. This is something that you may have never heard before, and it's taken me 5 months to actually tell you that gout can be a result of your mitochondria not processing glucose properly and creating a backlog of, of free radicals in the process, where now you don't get the ATP that you're supposed to. It gets cleaved off into another product, and then it gets eliminated from the cell, picked up in the blood, and now you end up with gout. So your gout problem can be a mitochondrial problem. So like now it's like, okay, how do I fix that? Yeah, how do you fix that, right? You just take a gout medication that has nothing to do with gout, right? Or nothing to do with that problem, right? No, that's not the way. It can take up to 2 weeks and in some cases months for the heart to produce enough ATP by natural built-in mechanisms to offset the deficit caused by ischemia. Also, since the heart is constantly consuming ATP, it is difficult to make the energy deficit quickly. And most patients with ischemia means without oxygen, really like without blood, which has the oxygen, right? Um, just think of it like that. If I'm ischemic, I'm running out of oxygen. I will need to take targeted nutritional therapy to help restore the energy balance. So understanding smooth muscle in your heart. A large part of our cardiovascular system involves smooth muscles not under the voluntarily control. So your autonomic nervous system controls smooth muscles, organs, and glands. That's your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system, right? So let's review their significance and what their normal and abnormal function look like. Smooth muscles are found in the blood vessels of the cardiovascular system, but are also contained within other organs and tubes in the body, including the stomach, the bladder, the intestines, the airways, the uterus, and the sex glands. Bundles of smooth muscles cells are also attached to hairs in the skin and to the iris lens of the eye. Smooth muscles receive input from autonomic nervous system. That's what we talked about, right? Parasympathetic, rest and recover, or sympathetic, fight or flight, that are going to innervate those smooth muscles. In addition to the autonomic nervous system, smooth muscles are controlled by hormones and other local chemical signals. Smooth muscle cells also develop tonic and phasic contractions in response to changes in load or length. By contrast, skeletal muscles are under voluntary control, and these are muscles we constantly contract and relax when we decide to move our arms or go for a walk. So, contraction, shortening of a muscle in smooth muscle, is a highly regulated process. In some smooth muscle cells, the contraction is maintained at a low level in the absence of external stimuli. This activity results in what is known as smooth muscle tone and its intensity can be varied. Keep this in mind when I discuss how this relates to conditions such as hypertension. See CoQ10 on page 144, and we might be able to get there in just a little bit. But regardless of the stimulus, smooth muscle contraction is initiated by calcium ions entering the cytosol, a membrane, and binding to a calcium-binding messenger protein called calmodulin. This stimulates another protein called myosin, and then you end up with muscle contraction right there. Initiation of relaxation, on the other hand, begins with the removal of calcium ions from cytosol and stimulation of the enzyme that deactivates myosin. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we talked about calcium, right? Calcium is also it can be very stimulating and irritating to the nervous system. So we take a lot of calcium and we do a lot of muscle contraction. But how do you get that calcium to get off of there? And so I'm going to use his words and not mine. Many people don't realize that muscle relaxation requires considerable amounts of energy, whether it is conscious decision to relax skeletal muscle or the involuntary relaxation of smooth muscle. The process requires decreased concentration of calcium ions. This calcium must be moved out of the cytosol and the sarcoplasmic reticulum. However, this process requires the use of a pump because calciums must move up the concentration gradient, and going against the gradient requires energy. So now the mitochondria become important. So anytime you want to get smooth muscle to relax, so what would be a reason that you would want smooth muscle to relax? Well, just think about your blood vessels. When you have contraction of your blood vessels, you increase your blood pressure. Put your thumb on the end of a water hose, and what happens? You increase the pressure. You can wash off your porch by squirting your thumb, right? You'll increase the pressure that's going through the hose when you decrease the volume. Smooth muscle contraction decreases the volume and increases the pressure. So we've got to be able to get that calcium to relax that smooth muscle. We got to get that calcium away from those muscles and out of that cell. Well, we got to pump it out of there. So we pump it, we got to have ATP. We got to have energy to make the pump work. And that's what he's about to get into right here. The process requires the use of a pump because the calcium must move up the concentration gradient. And going against the gradient requires energy. That energy, of course, comes from ATP. The enzyme embedded in the membrane of the sarcoplasmic reticulum called calcium magnesium ATPase, CalMag-ATPase, when activated, binds two calcium ions, which are then transferred to the inner part and released. This pump also has two ATP binding sites. Both sites must have ATP attached to it to work. However, there are intricacies, and he's going to get into that just a little bit, but the state of rigor mortis, when our muscles become tense and rigid after death, is a good example of how relaxation requires more ATP than contraction. In death, fuel and oxygen are no longer delivered to the muscle, and ATP production stops. Without enough ATP, the calcium ions cannot be pumped out of the cell, and the muscle can no longer relax. Right? So that's what's happening right there. Magnesium ions are also necessary for the activity of calcium magnesium ATPase. They bind to the catalytic site of this enzyme to mediate the reaction. Listen to this. Without magnesium, this enzyme cannot function, and relaxation of smooth muscle cannot occur, which can lead to things like high blood pressure, heart problems, restricted breathing. For those who might have heard magnesium is great for muscle function and relaxation, but didn't know how or why, and now you know. And that's Dr. No's message right there. We got to have magnesium. We got to make sure. Why? If we don't get enough magnesium, we might have high blood pressure. We might have heart problems. We might have trouble breathing, right? I really believe that we're over-calciumed. We're over-calciumed and we're under-magnesiumed, and that ends up causing problems for us. So that's just one of them. That's one of the areas right there that you can get into. And he finishes this little section about talking about blood pressure, systolic and diastolic blood pressure, and what happens with the heart and in cardiovascular disease. But I want to get over here to the role of mitochondria in the nervous system, brain, and cognitive health. And it's very important right there, right? Tissues with a high demand for energy are uniquely dependent on the energy delivered by mitochondria, and therefore also have the lowest threshold for displaying symptoms of mitochondrial dysfunction. So if you have a tissue that has a high demand for energy, then that tissue is very susceptible to mitochondrial dysfunction, because if the mitochondria is not functioning properly, you can't get enough energy for those cells to function. Large amounts of energy are required by neurons, nerve cells, to carry out their specialized function. In fact, while the brain makes up only 2% of a person's body weight, which of course varies depending on the person, at rest it consumes about 20% of the total energy of body needs. The brain only takes up 2% of body weight, but 20% of the total energy the body needs. The brain is a giant tangle of countless neurons, so it would stand to reason that this organ might suffer significantly from mitochondrial dysfunction and possibly respond to best mitochondrial nutrients. Stroke. Here's something that you might not know about stroke. Cycling of blood through the circulatory system delivers constant supply of oxygen, glucose, and nutrients to every living cell. The brain consumes a disproportionate share of the body's circulating blood flow, 14%, and oxygen, 20%. Yet, despite its extraordinary energy demand, the brain's energy reserves are actually very small. The brain's metabolism can sustain energy production for about 1 minute before it needs to be replenished. Thus, nerve cells are particularly vulnerable to ischemia, reduced blood flow, right? The ischemia means reduced blood flow. The blood is carrying the oxygen, the glucose, the nutrients. So that when you decrease the blood flow, then you end up with hypoxia, which is reduced oxygen levels. When the steady flow of blood through the portion of the brain tissue ceases, as from a clot or a hemorrhage, metabolism rapidly fails in brain cells. As the oxygen supply runs out, the cells shift to anaerobic metabolism for a short term. That means without oxygen. But after a few minutes without blood, neurons suffer irreversible damage. During a stroke, however, blood supply is not cut off uniformly, and this is interesting to know right here. Instead, impairment in circulation is more severe towards the core of the affected area, where the lack of flow might be almost complete. Cells in the core tend to die quickly through necrosis. They just start to eat themselves. Remember, as opposed to apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, right? We talked about that. Necrosis is messy. Cells break apart, splitting their contents into nearby tissues, which further aggravates the situation by causing inflammation. An important consequence of a stroke is that cells in the surrounding area die off hours and days later. How and why this happens remains a mystery. However, the secondary brain damage is considered potentially preventable. A growing body of research suggests that the focus of both primary and secondary stroke damage and potential intervention or therapy lies in the mitochondria. See, that's why it's like, look, don't wait to have a stroke to try to be healthy. If you can be healthy and then you end up having a stroke for some reason, then you're better off on the other side of it if you've worked on protecting your mitochondria. And so what's interesting is that mitochondria might actually suffer greater injury when blood flow is reduced rather than when it stops altogether. Complete blockage of blood flow also cuts off the supply of oxygen, which in turn reduces oxidative stress and free radical production. When blood flow is merely reduced, a small amount of oxygen continues to flow, generating further free radicals in addition to those resulting from stroke-impaired cellular respiration. What that means is that if you don't have any oxygen getting to the tissue, then you can't make any free radicals, because the free radical is a production of oxygen metabolism. But if you have low levels of oxygen getting to the tissue, you'll have just enough oxygen getting there to cause free radicals to build up, but you won't have enough energy or glucose in the cell to get the process to go all the way through the process. And then, so what you end up with is you end up with a reduction of ATP and an increase in free radicals. That's an interesting thought right there. So, these additional free radicals could also explain the secondary damage that occurs days later. A paper published in early 1992 suggests that transition from reversible to irreversible ischemia depends on the functional state of the mitochondria. More specifically, their ability to restore oxidative phosphorylation determines functional recovery. Just meaning, once the mitochondria starts to get damaged, can it recover quick enough to get the oxygen back and get the ATP going and get everything going like it's supposed to, right? Well, what do you think would be better? To have a healthy mitochondria or to have a sick mitochondria before this whole thing starts? Right? It would be way better to have a healthy mitochondria before this thing starts. With their high sensitivity to reduced blood flow, the brain mitochondria exhibit the first signs of injury even during the moderate reduction of cerebral blood flow. Injury to mitochondria during and after stroke has many consequences and includes impaired bioenergetics, free radical damage, calcium dysregulation, increased excitotoxicity, and promotion of programmed cell death. Unfortunately, as typical for mitochondria impairment, mitochondrial brain injury causes further mitochondrial damage in those cells lacking blood flow. General and vicious cycles of cellular injury after a stroke. I give an article out. I don't have a notebook right here handy, or I'd read it to you. But I get an article out with every new patient that comes into the office. When they get their notebook, at the back of the notebook, it has a article on how the hemodynamics, the blood flow to the brain, changes when you lose your cervical curve. So listen to what that means. Like if you have a reversed cervical curve or you have a straightening of the cervical curve, it changes the way the blood flow changes the way the blood flows to the brain. Now take that same information, because this is where I was talking about last night, where things stack. So once you start to understand this and then you read the book, a sentence like this just pops. It pops out at you. Sometimes you go over it. That's what I think about the Bible. The Bible does the same thing. The more you understand it, the more you understand life, the more you have wisdom in your days and all that sort of thing, is the more you see those sentences pop. You're like, now I know what that means, right? With their high sensitivity to reduced blood flow, brain mitochondria exhibit the first signs of injury, even during a moderate reduction of cerebral blood flow. Brain mitochondria exhibit the first signs of injury even during moderate reduction of cerebral blood flow. Yes. You lose the power to your brain. You lose the power through decreased blood flow, through loss of cervical curve to your brain. And the mitochondria suffer because of that, way before you even know anything is happening. Your mitochondria suffer way before you have a symptom, before it becomes symptomatic. That's why this idea that I feel great is really, it's really ignorant when it comes to how your health is, because you've got physiology going on inside your body that's going on without you even being able to feel it. Like, tell me right now how your spleen is feeling. Like, you have a spleen, you don't know that, but you have a spleen, and it gets rid of your red blood cells when they get old. How's it feeling right now? You have any problems with your spleen? You don't have any idea, right? How do you feel? How's your liver feel right now? You don't have any idea, right? Like, those things are things that you can't necessarily feel. You can't feel all those things that are happening. We just know that right there, right? So why is it important to have a cervical curve? It's important to have a cervical curve for lots of reasons. Remember last night we talked about it with POTS. And you could go back and watch that show. But if you've got POTS and you've got a loss of your cervical curve, then you hit that vestibular sympathetic reflex, and now all of a sudden your heart rate goes up because you don't get enough blood flow back to your heart from your feet. Crazy. It's crazy. See what I mean? See what I mean when I get to say I get to work on the most amazing system in the universe? Like, I seriously do every single day. It's like, it's super great right there. Injury to mitochondria during and after a stroke has many consequences, including impaired I said all that. Unfortunately, as typical for mitochondrial impairment, mitochondrial brain injuries causes further mitochondrial damage in those brain cells lacking blood flow, generating a vicious cycle of cellular injury after the stroke. So that's just one area, is the stroke. So let's talk about neurodegeneration. As early as 1999, a series of published scientific reviews summarized the mounting body of evidence that the role of mitochondria in neurodegeneration. One review by Casarino and colleagues stated, "It is becoming clear and subtle functional alterations in these essential cellular dynamos can lead to insidious pathological changes in neurons." That's a big, long sentence that says your nerve cells can get disease whenever your mitochondria stop working properly. The authors outline the theory of neurodegeneration based upon the vicious cycle of mtDNA mutation, bioenergetic decline, and free radical damage. Same thing, right? These published studies now collaborate the role of abnormal mitochondrial dynamics in neuronal cell death and the onset of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington's disease, and other neurodegenerative disorders. Although many health conditions, aging, and general neurodegenerative degeneration have similar basic causes, the physiology of the brain is unique in certain ways, and its pathologies present some interesting mechanisms and features. Um, Excitotoxicity. In the late 1980s, scientists at the National Institutes of Health proposed that excitotoxicity, toxicity from overstimulation of nerves, develops when the energy levels of neurons declines. Subsequent research has confirmed this, as studies have shown that CoQ10, remember this is a complex compound that helps shuttle electrons from complex 1, never mind, CoQ10 protects against excitotoxicity by raising energy levels in nerve cells. Glutamate normally transmits excitatory impulses. In neurodegeneration, however, the brain becomes chronically oversensitized to glutamate, oversensitive, which then becomes a slow-reacting excitatory toxin in our brain. For mitochondria, this means that there's constantly under the direct production of more energy than the neurons actually need. With this higher rate of activity comes a higher rate of free radical production, and over time comes an accelerated demise of these mitochondria. Ultimately, this chain of events results in dysfunction within the neurons. We destroy the mitochondria, and we have a problem. CoQ10 is one of the things I take every single day. It's in my little pill bottle. I'll take it tonight when I get home. CoQ10 is helping me with this whole excitatory thing to keep my brain functioning like it's supposed to. I can go through here and I can read. It's Alzheimer's disease. It's Parkinson's disease. It's depression. It's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Pay attention to the mitochondria. Right? It's the same thing. Chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic encephalitis, encephalomyelitis, and fibromyalgia. To pay attention to the mitochondria. If you keep your mitochondria, type 2 diabetes has a component that goes along with what's going on with your mitochondrial diabetes, medication-induced mitochondrial damage and disease. Right? That's why we try to talk so much about the medications that can cause things. Tylenol's on the list. Anti-anxiety medications, antibiotics, antidepressants, antipsychotics, cancer, cholesterol medications, statins, right at the top. All those statins right there, right at the top of mitochondrial dysfunction. This is medications documented to induce mitochondrial damage. It's right here, table 2.1 on page 96. Medications that induce mitochondrial damage, right? Statins are right there at the top of the list. Dementia medications, diabetes medications, metformin right there at the top of the list. So if you're taking metformin and you're taking a statin, what are you doing to your mitochondria? And how's your health getting? Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. Is your health getting better or getting worse since you've been on your statins and your metformin? Right? Yeah. What did it do? Did we ever consider the fact that maybe the reason that was happening is because we had ourselves in an environment that was incongruent with health? I think that's the direction that we should go, right? In the back of the book, he's going to talk about the nutritional things that we can add to and help us. And it's going to go through a lot of things that we've already talked about. We might touch on some of these but eat well, move well, and think well. That's the most important thing. That's why it goes back to me. It goes back to the mitochondria. Keep your mitochondria protected. Take your fish oil. Get your exercise. Keep your mitochondria working like they're supposed to, and you got a chance to live a healthier life. So that's the end of the show. I really appreciate you guys. I hope you guys have a good Valentine's. I hope you have someone to love, and if you don't, just remember we love you right here at The Rock. I love you. I spent my Valentine's night talking to you. So if there's anything we can do to help your health, please let us know. I'd be glad to help you. And I look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow night at 6. You guys have a great night.